Hello everybody, welcome to another video, and welcome to my review of the world's first truly bezel-less smartphone. This is the Sharp Aquos Crystal. So the first category we're going to look at is hardware. This phone is made 100% out of plastic. It's a budget-conscious device, so you're not going to be seeing any metal or even any glass anywhere on this phone. On the back you've got this dimpled soft-touch plastic, and then on the front you've got this massive sheet of perspex covering the entire face of the phone. It's definitely not the slimmest phone out there at 10mm thick, but in the hand it feels absolutely awesome. The back has a nice curvature to it, and the dimpled plastic makes the phone grip in your palm really nicely. In terms of build quality, I'd say it's at the very, very least on par with something like the Moto G. I'll go on to performance now in a minute, but in terms of specs, this thing is packing a quad-core Snapdragon 400 processor, the Adreno 305 GPU, 1.5 gigs of RAM, 8 gigs of internal storage with microSD support up to 128 gigabytes, an 8 megapixel rear-facing camera, a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera, a 2040 mAh battery, and finally, that gorgeous 5-inch 1280 by 720p display. I said this in my first impressions video, but using this bezel-less display for the first time was a truly surreal experience. Since the electronic display as we know it was invented, bezels have always been a factor, and our brains over time have come to acknowledge their existence and do their bit to block them out so we can focus on the display itself. So when I turned this thing on for the first time, my brain just genuinely didn't know what to make of it. It is truly incredible. The 720p resolution, in my opinion, at this level is an advantage, as having less pixels to push helps both the processor and the battery life out enormously. And I still, from a normal viewing distance, can't discern one pixel from another, so on that front there's definitely nothing to worry about. And Sharp obviously knows what they're doing when it comes to displays, so the colours and the contrast levels are just superb, and all in all, I'm gonna say it, this panel is probably the best I've ever used in a phone before, which is massively impressive given the fact you can pick one of these up for under $150. Moving on to software and performance then. This phone is running a near stock version of Android 4.4.2 KitKat. It comes with a standard Sprint bloatware and the odd Sharp application here and there, but aside from that, it is pure stock Android. The UI runs really nicely on the Snapdragon 400 processor, and having that extra 512 megs of RAM over a standard budget phone at this price point makes multitasking a much more pleasurable experience. If your requirements are social networking, web browsing, video and music, then you're 100% set. Heavy 3D games, however, aren't really the Crystal's forte. Of course, the less demanding games like Temple Run or Subway Surfers are going to run without an issue, but when you get into the heavier stuff like Grand Theft Auto or Dead Trigger, you really see the GPU start to sweat. If you're an avid gamer, then I definitely advise you go out and get something a little beefier, but honestly, for 95% of people, this thing will be absolutely fine. Now on to battery life then, and this is where this phone really surprised me. As I said earlier, this is packing the Snapdragon 400 processor, which is now actually being used in numerous smartwatches with tiny little 400 mAh batteries. So imagine what happens when you put this inside a phone with a 2000 mAh battery. It's awesome. 9 times out of 10, I can squeeze 2 full days of use out of this thing. And this is all while being tethered to my Moto 360 via Bluetooth 24/7. Before I wrap this review up then, I really need to address a couple of not so good points about this phone. Firstly, there's a pretty big issue where the backlight becomes visible when you hold the phone at a certain angle. From my research, it seems to be a pretty common issue with these phones. It doesn't affect the display itself, but it's something definitely worth mentioning. Secondly, the touchscreen can become weirdly unresponsive for about 30 seconds after you wake the phone up. It's only really noticeable while typing, but I did find myself getting extremely annoyed with having to retype words because my touchscreen decided to have a funny 5 minutes. So there we go. That is the Sharp Aquos Crystal. It's a superbly innovative phone that is fantastic value for money. Yes, it does have its little flaws, but if you're looking for a phone under $200, and you want something a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more unique than the pretty bland Moto G, then this is the go-to device. The display is revolutionary, the battery life is awesome, and even with budget aside, it's just hands down a great phone. So I hope you enjoyed this video guys, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.